Welcome to GothCast. I'm Dr. Sanders, and today I'm going to be going over my top 5 books that I read in 2019. Now, I read a lot of things in 2019, but I thought for my list I would do the top 5 books that were new to me that I read in 2019. So if they were published a long time ago, it doesn't matter. This was just things that I first read and enjoyed in 2019. There's still a lot of good books that come out nowadays, and probably a lot more than people think, because a lot of people say, oh, well, only the good stuff has been written years ago, but I don't think that's true. And I thought it'd be interesting. You know, we can't all just reread our battered copies of the Vampire Lestat or our novelization of The Crow's City of Angels. Why do I have this? Anyway, this is going to be my top 5 books that were new to me that I read in 2019. Ooh, I also did want to mention that I am reading right now. I'm reading Dean Koontz' Frankenstein. Not that far into it, but I gotta say, I'm interested to see where this goes. And some people have probably read the entire series. They're probably going, oh no, you shouldn't be. But I thought it was really weird that Dean Koontz made a Frankenstein series that I was unaware of. That I found this at a used bookstore not that long ago. Coming in at number 5 is going to be Peter Hook's book, Unknown Pleasures, Inside Joy Division. This was a great book. I actually received this as a gift a long time ago, and I don't know if I started it back then or if I ever finished it, but I really sat down this last year and read it in its entirety. Boy, it was really good. It's another one of those books that kind of, I don't know, people say you have to take with a grain of salt, like you really need to hear everyone else's side of the story. And I'll probably seek that out at some point. But it's very interesting seeing the perspective of Peter Hook on the band and talking about just how scrappy they really were and how rough it really was being in the band. You know, it wasn't really planned out as much as people like to think it was. So it's a really interesting book in that you get a different perspective to the band. You're not just a brooding sort of all darkness all the time thing. It's really more like a couple of guys hanging out in a band, being young dudes, and it's really interesting in that way. So really recommend it. I also got to read the other one, Inside New Order. I feel like that one will be a lot juicier than this one was, because obviously we know that with New Order there was a lot of infighting and a lot of different things that happened. So anyway, if you want a different perspective on the band, and of course of the different members like Ian, this will provide it for you. This was published in 2012, so just to let you know that it is a few years old at this point. It's about 8 years old because it is 2020, but still a great book. Number 4 is going to be The Cure, A Perfect Dream. This is another book that is more of like a coffee table book. I've reviewed a lot of this different kind of stuff. There's The Art of Gothic and I think a few of the Tim Burton ones, but this one obviously focuses on The Cure and pretty much throughout their whole career, and I really like the photos in here. A lot of them are really good. Some of them are a little fuzzy, but what can you expect? It's some pretty humble roots for the band. I like how they do talk about a lot of the drama involved with the band, and they talk, of course, about Lowell Tolhurst's lawsuit in here. They don't really kind of dance around a lot of that. They're very direct with it, and I really like that. In fact, you could even think of this as a visual companion to Lowell Tolhurst's book, because there are quotes from that book in here that are used to kind of build up the story and fill in a lot of the gaps with it. So it's a pretty interesting book for that, but honestly the photos and everything in here just really surprised me, and I thought it was really good. This book was published in 2018, so not the newest book. Like I said, it doesn't really matter when these are published, but this one was published in 2018, so it's a pretty recent thing related to The Cure. And yeah, if you're a fan, I really recommend it. Alright, number 3 is going to be Soul on Fire, The Life and Music of Peter Steele. This was republished last year as a second printing of it, and this is the Read Again version, which I thought was cool because, you know, there was the Valentine's Day version of Dead Again. Obviously it's a play on that. This was initially published in 2014. This particular version actually adds a little more to the book. But as a fan of Typo Negative, you're really struggling to find books published about them. You can find magazines and buy them and have specific articles and interviews with them, but you're not really going to find something dedicated to them. This book is obviously extremely controversial within the fan base. There was a whole thing about the family pulling support of it, and the ruling of Peter Steele's death in this book has been debated a lot because it is basically just a biography of Peter Steele, a really good one, and I did really like it. I would say it almost, I wouldn't say it made my perspective of Peter Steele necessarily completely different, but it's a very sad book. Obviously, Peter Steele died much younger than many people believe he should have, and made some amazing music. Some of my favorite albums of all time. And this book, it was kind of heart-wrenching. I just can't describe it enough how much you're just like, you feel really bad for Peter Steele, with his demons and the things that he went through, and just, it kind of goes a little bit into, some psychology of him, maybe some trying to diagnose certain things that maybe, I get it. I get why people were frustrated with this book in some aspects of it. And there are people who call flat out like, this thing is false in here, and they point out like certain things. But I bet it was really hard to write this book because I believe the band members also pulled out of this publication, and along with the family members, I'm sure it got really, really hard to get this book out because Peter Steele was a very, very private person. But I am glad that they published this again in 2019 because this book was very hard to get a hold of. The initial printing, the 2014 printing of this. So I'm really glad that they did this. Also, pretty interesting cover, the one, Peter Steele and Carnivore. I know people want to see a full review of this. Let me know if there's anything here that you want me to cover in depth as well. But I know people have been bugging me to do this one, and I get it. There's a lot to talk about with this one though, so I will get to it eventually, I promise. At number 2 is probably going to be a really big surprise to some of you, probably to everyone actually, in that it doesn't relate to vampires, it doesn't relate to werewolves, it doesn't relate to the goth community, it doesn't even relate to goth music, but it's a series of novels that I really enjoyed this last year and brought me much happiness during my breaks at work. And it's the Tech War series. Now, if you have no idea what I'm talking about here, these are a series of novels that were billed as written by William Shatner, and they were published from 1989 to 1997. Now, the actual author is Ron Goulart. I think that's how you say his name. That's who actually wrote these books, even though they are billed as written by William Shatner. They were ghost written, as they say, where somebody else writes it, but the more popular person gets credit for it. And these books just really had that kind of cheesy sci-fi B-movie thing about it that just drew me to it. I don't know, I just really like the character Jake Cardigan. It's all cheese. But something about this just really got me. I like the sci-fi setting. I like the idea of like the drug war for all this stuff. I've only read up to Tech Secret, so I believe it's the 6th book. But so I haven't finished the entire series because I got to get a hold of them. It's for some reason Tech War just isn't inside of every Barnes and Noble and every single bookstore that exists at this moment. I can't believe that. You think these would be flying off the shelves. But yeah, it's interesting that it spawned a TV series. It did all this stuff. It didn't have a video game, I guess, but the actual novel I just really enjoyed. It seems like a super, super weird book to be number 2. Well, I mean, I'm including the entire series because I like the first 2 books, Tech War and Tech Lords. I actually think Tech Lords was better. But for me in the last year, I just really liked them. So yeah, the Tech War series is my number 2. Coming at number 1, it's going to be a really strange book. But my number 1 book that I read last year and really enjoyed was Masters of Doom. How 2 guys created an empire and transformed pop culture by David Kirshner. This book was initially published in 2003, and you see I don't have a physical copy here with me. That's because I was just going through my local library, and this book had been recommended to me so many times, and I always kind of just put it off. I was like, probably about computer programming. And while I'm into computer programming, a lot of computer in myself, I just thought, there's no way that's going to be entertaining to me. But I saw it on all these bestseller lists and all these things, and I was like, you know what? I'll just rent it, see if I like it. I loved this book. I couldn't put it down. If you're even kind of into computer programming or even like older video games or anything like that, it's just an interesting story, even if you don't like that kind of stuff, because the way it's written is just so enticing. The author basically interviewed everyone involved in this, and this is a real life story. You know, it's just telling a true story. To interview people like John Romero, John Carmack, Tom Hall, like all these people who are really important to the creation of these things, and just got their side of the story and then wrote it to be the form of like a novel. So it's really, really good. And I was super surprised. I just thought this was going to be some like, okay, it's going to tell a story of this. It's going to be like, so he was programming this day, and oh, and then he got this done, and then he got this done. No, it had all these twists and turns and this backstabbing and weird, just really strange things. And I was completely immersed in this, and I really loved it. I can't describe it enough. I was totally shocked by it, and it ended up being the most memorable thing I read last year out of the many things I read. So if you're kind of interested in computer programming, older video games, if you're interested in business, like creation of like a successful business, or even pop culture to some extent, this book is good for all those things. And it helps if you know a little bit about computers or a little bit about programming, but it's not necessary. I just can't recommend Masters of Doom enough. But it was my 2019 book of the year, although it was published in 2003, but it was my book of the year last year. It's kind of a weird list, but I hope you enjoyed it. And of course, let me know what were the favorite books that you read last year. And if you want me to take a closer look at anything else here, here's to 2020. I'm sure I'm gonna read a lot of books this year. I've already started reading a few different things, and man, some of them are really good. Make sure to stay spooky. I'm not heavy, the chair is just really old.